It is Tool or Die. I am Joel Johnson. My regular co-host Alex is not joining us today. He is on a plane to New Zealand to drive trucks through the whatever the equivalent of the outback would be in New Zealand, the up or down. I am joined today by an old friend of mine, Bree Pettis. Bree, we have known each other for like 20 some odd years. Kind of came through the Make magazine universe and a bunch of that stuff. And funnily enough, our almost neighbors here in New York in the Hudson Valley. You know, Bree was a luminary in the makerspace and built MakerBot and 3D printing was like right on the rise of all of that. But after that company sold and moved out in 2017, I believe, you bought what became Bantam Tools that makes desktop CNC. And we'd had a few discussions over the years of what the culture and what you've learned when you kind of moved out of the hobbyist, maker, tinkerer world. When you bought a CNC company, what did you learn about machining and machinists that was a surprise to you?
There's this thing that can happen in contemporary society where really big, complicated machinery that's usually like super, super expensive, can be made more affordable, and the software to run it can be made easier. And I got my feet wet on that with MakerBot, where when we started MakerBot, we wanted a 3D printer. They cost like 60 grand at the low end. And we were like, we figured out how to do this with like $700 a part. So clearly we should launch a kit for $1,000. And there's probably like, we thought at the time, like, oh, there's probably like 10 other people who wanna do this. And we made 20 kits and then they sold out instantly. And we were like, we're screwed. Um, but this idea of like things that are really expensive and hard to use, making them more affordable and easy to use, it's a really interesting like approach to have as a creative person and infrastructure builder, because you know before we got into it, 3D printers were like just the material was super expensive. They were like in the realm of you had to like work at Lego or work at Hasbro or work at the and do it in aerospace to have access to these things. So the likelihood that people were going to do absurd and stupid things with them was very low before we showed up. We showed up. It made it possible for people to do wonderful and absurd things and try things out in a new way with lower barrier to entry, lower costs. So just it took off. It was an exciting ride. We started with three guys, a laser cutter, and a dream. And when I left MakerBot, there were 600 employees and 500,000 square feet in Industry City, right? So I got the full experience in that company with. Oh, and I've got the train right next to me too. So we're gonna
It's
have
fine.
all the joys of the Hudson Valley.
This is a podcast about manufacturing. I feel like it only makes us seem more legit if you can hear trains and construction.
There are only two things you need to know when it comes to coffee. The first is that McDonald's is always better than Starbucks. And the second is that if you are making coffee at home, you need fresh beans. I learned that from my friend Tonks, whose company, Yes Please, roast up a selection of affordable but very high quality coffee beans in Los Angeles every week and mails them to my home. Yes Please has a code DIE TODAY, DIETODAY, to get 15% off your first order. Make it in a cheap coffee maker. Make it in a fancy espresso machine. They have a blend for espresso as well. Make cowboy coffee, it doesn't matter. If you grind freshly roasted beans, your coffee will be good. This is tea because this is a commercial, but their coffee is very good. I drink it every day, I promise.
So to get back to your question, buying a CNC company, that showed up on my doorstep, where Danielle Applestone, the founder of Other Machine Company, reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you've bought and sold companies. I've made a nice small business here. It's not gonna see a hockey stick growth of a venture-backed company that all my investors want, but we make a sweet little machine that shouldn't die." And I was like, "Hey, happy to help." And by the end of that conversation, I was like, I want this company to live too. So, I'll make an offer. And she ended up shopping it around to everybody else, and my offer won. And the and then all of a sudden, I had a company in California, So ended up moving it into Peekskill at end of 2018 and buying some broken down industrial property and fixing it up and building some of the team came over and some of them didn't. And we built out a team here. And now we've got, about 20,000 square feet split between machining, assembly, and engineering and marketing and support. So all that sort of just adds up to having a company in manufacturing in the modern way, in that we make something, we sell it on the internet primarily, and we do all, and that's the way that works. But was your question like, what's the difference between, like, what did I learn about machinists?
Yeah, I mean, you made your initial bones with MakerBot with, and not to say people in a professional capacity weren't using MakerBot units, but there's a big difference between 3D printing and CNC, and it really is at a basic level the difference between plastic and metal. But I think there's also some expectations of what a tool should actually do that were new to you.
So we started off with a PCB milling machine, which you put in copper-clad FR1, and you could mill out traces and make your own electronics, basically, without having to ship it off to China. And this was super popular until like 2018, 2019, when the Chinese electronics industry basically said, oh, you want to make electronics? Instead of costing like $500 and taking a month to make a prototype PCB, printed circuit board, we're going to make that $5 and we're going to turn it around in a week and send you 3 of them. And that basically, like, we still have people who love that machine and who love to make prototypes on it, but it pretty much wiped out the market for the prototyping machine. So we made a machine that would make aluminum parts, was optimized to machine aluminum. And machinists are a different group of folks. I mean, and our customers are not amateurs. They're, for the most part, either academics where they're teaching machining, or they are innovators where they're doing prototyping. So we've shipped machines to SpaceX, Tesla, to all the branches of NASA, to all the branches of the DoD. And for the most part, they use our machine and don't want anybody to know how they're doing things. So, like, one of the upsides of selling products to nerds and hobbyists and people who are like more public about what they do is they tell the story of what they're doing. And if you make a machine, your machine's part of that story. We probably have parts on the space station, but our customers wouldn't tell us, right? Because like that's their process is part of their secret.
It is almost just a cultural difference, like I'm reminded of like viral videos of showing welders in like a really tight bead, and watching somebody who's spent 30 years learning a discipline. They didn't come up in an environment where they're like, I'm going to show that on TikTok every week until I get better, and I'm going to build in public. Like, what from like a customer standpoint, like what kind of care and feeding did they need? Like, what was it like to actually have a tooling customer?
I would say that there's a couple different kinds of customers that we have. We have the impatient engineers who are becoming machinists, and we have people who are adding our CNC machine to the mix of, they're already a machinist. And for people who are already machinists, they're using their ears as their prime, like they're looking at the part, of course, and the quality of the part and measuring the tolerances, but they can hear when something sounds good when it's machining. And a lot of times when it doesn't sound the way they want it to, they're like, we need to speed it up. Normally you'd be like, oh, maybe we're being too aggressive, but machinists are just the ears are their primary awareness tool when something is being machined. So a machinist can walk into a machine shop and they'll know instantly if it's a well-run shop just using their ears, right? I would say the other part, there's just they're not, influencers in the same way that hobbyists are. They're not in that sort of influencer crew. They're very practical. They want things to work. They want them to work, if not on the first try, the second try. They want to be able to get their they want to make parts. So it's a less storytelling, more practical sort of experience. And our machine's optimized for aluminum. So the aluminum parts are like very it is like the best material in the world. It's an ultra functional material. It's ultra light. It's strong. It's great. So a lot of these parts are brackets, or in many cases, people are using our desktop CNC to like accent their other CNCs and do the prototyping work and let their large CNCs do the production work. Or if they have to make, because we sort of win the John Henry race on the first article. Like you can get a first article quickly, even though our machine cutting speeds aren't as fast as a machine that's like 14,000 pounds. Ours is only 80. Well, our ease of use and flow is fast, but if you want to go into production, you're gonna get tired of using our machine and swapping out every tool because it doesn't have a tool changer after like the third or fourth time you make something. People do use it for production. Magicians love to buy our machine and make fake coins that have like secret compartments or stuff like this. And there's people who make guitar pedals like to use our machine. People who do, we have an amazing luthier who uses our machine to make custom guitar hardware. But I would say for the most part in industry, it's used as a prototyping machine.
A through line of everything that is happening in manufacturing, reshoring, politics, everything right now is really the context of China took our manufacturing capability, or just as arguably we gave it away to China over the last 40 or 50 years. What is your snapshot on what the speed and capabilities and iterative advancements of Chinese manufacturing? What have they gotten really good at in the last 5 years that maybe people are not as aware of? And then I'd like to talk to you after that about what your sense of the American capability and landscape of machine shops and manufacturing is. Let's start with China.
I mean, the global sort of manufacturing landscape is it's complicated, and there's a few factors that I think are sort of important when the US is trying to figure out how it relates to other manufacturing places in the world, like China. The US, small businesses carry a lot of the social fabric of the United States. I pay for my employees' health insurance. It costs like $1,300 a month per person. And it's and if they have a family, I pay for their family health insurance, which costs about $1,300 per person in their family. And then and it goes on from there, right? So in China, they don't like that. That's not part of a small business's thing. And in many cases, when China wants to, as a culture, in their 200-year plan for world domination, they've got like they take care of stuff that they want to get done. So when they had a pork shortage, they were like, well, we need to buy some American pork companies, get the best tech in pork, import that tech, and then also just leave a lot of the pigs in the United States because they're actually pretty toxic, and they figure that stuff out, right? So as a culture, they're able to maneuver, and make those kind of deals happen. I mean, I think the pork deal happened, like that company that wanted to buy is it Smithfields? I'm vegetarian, so I'm sort of useless at this. But they raised like $5 billion in like a week from the Chinese government to buy a pork company, right? So their ability to maneuver and make stuff happen as a culture is fast, like, and abundant if they want to, if the government wants it to happen and there's resources for that. So ours is like, doesn't work that way. So, and probably for good reasons, like, but on the other hand, like Americans are like, we want to do this super weird thing and it'll probably fall flat on its face. And in any other country, I would be like shamed perpetually and my family would be shamed. Like, but I'm going to do it anyway. And in America, we're like, yeah, go team, do something absolutely stupid that might have a win. And if you fall on your face, you know what? You can get up and do it again. So like there's definitely like America wins on like the breakneck pace of innovation and willingness to try things out. Like the support for that is high. The support for making mistakes is moderate, and that gives America an advantage just in innovation in general. I would say in the last 5 years, you're seeing China take advantage of all that. I mean, they're generating culture of developing products quick and fast and better. You know, I'd look at DJI and the drone industry. Like we got to like we took advantage of the drone industry with our CNC. We have a brushless motor that I bought, you know, 2 of these brushless motors for a combat robot project in 2005 for 15 grand. And now each of these motors is like 125 bucks. And it's nearly a 1 horsepower motor. And it's small. It's like the size of this orange, and you know, runs at 14,000 RPM all day long. So, uh, you know, I think, you know, innovators in general have to take advantage of other industries' economies of scale. But like DJI is making great freaking products, and you know, and you can look at Bamboo Labs in the 3D printing space. That's a bunch of DJI folks who went on to go build Bamboo
That's
Labs.
exactly who I
Also,
was thinking about. Yeah.
great freaking product, amazing quality. You know, I've got 4 of them in my workshop and 8 of them next door in production, and we just crank out parts, and they look amazing. So, and they're totally functional, moderately tolerant, and beautiful. So, um, I think the days of China making subpar parts are over, or subpar products are over. You know, but there's still like regulatory stuff. Like we make one of the things we haven't even gotten into is we make art machines, and there's a bunch of Chinese companies that make knockoffs, right? We get ours FCC and CE certified, which means that like you can get our product, and independent assessors have assessed that this is safe for your home. And but the products you buy from China, like nobody can sue them easily in the United States. So if your house burns down because you bought a bunch of knockoff products, it might be half the price. But we can't sell non-certified products because we would be liable, and it's just wrong. But our competitors can. So there's some advantages that they still have there, and I think that those are probably starting. That advantage of being able to sell uncertified products is going away, just as it's becoming easier for Chinese manufacturers to certify products. So I don't know. I think the big question in industry right now is if you make electromechanical devices like we do that have parts like motors that aren't made anywhere else in the world except for China, you know, what's going to happen with the tariffs? You know, Trump created 25% tariffs on nearly everything that we buy from China, like our motors and electronics, our electronic components. We manufacture those here, but a lot of the components are made there. And then, you know, I think, you know, in a few days it'll go up another 10%, but it might go up another 60%. So like there's sort of like we're sort of playing chicken with our customers, and that is just we're just going to pass that on to our customers. It's going to cost 10% more to buy our products with no added value, which just sucks for everybody. Like we don't want that for our customers. We don't want that for our competition. We like it makes us less competitive. I'm grumpy about that. I'm sort of staring that down, seeing how that goes, and sort of just white knuckling that.
The strategy, as I understand it, is that the Trump administration, even in the previous administration, Biden kept a lot of the China
Yeah, he
tariffs in
did.
place, but it's like, let's increase the tariffs and thus encourage Western and specifically U.S. companies, if they don't already exist, to be created to be the supply, you know, fit into the supply chain where that can work. TSMC and the chip factory was like kind of the biggest win, I guess, arguably of the last like couple of years when that was trying to be there. But when you go to something like motors, there's a lot of components, even down to things like fasteners, that just aren't made here anymore. And I haven't seen any plan yet at a federal level. I think states do a little better about saying, great, We need batteries. We're going to build a battery plant. We need motors. We need a motor. We're going to subsidize that. And it is ironic to a certain extent, even when you get into things like healthcare, not to go down the healthcare line, but, I've long thought the best argument for socialized medicine in the US is small business creation, right? It just takes a big chunk of the initial cost out of the factor. If we want
Yeah.
10,000 new SMBs to show up every year, then taking, anything to make that easier is there. Nevertheless, the point I'm trying to make is there's a funny irony that's happening now where you have a planned economy that actually seems to be able to stand up innovation in business faster than a market-based economy here. And we got to fix it. What do you see? What's been your experience over the last, since you stood Bantam up about the manufacturing capabilities within the U.S.?
So U.S. manufacturing has its strengths in DoD work and medical devices because they're just those industries accommodate the cost of doing business in the United States, right? You can sell that stuff for a premium. The consumer goods are, as far as I can tell, for the most part, long gone, and I sort of am in this sort of odd space where I make very niche, for the most part. I make niche-ish products. We have a team of 3 machinists, 12 assemblers, and another 8 or 9 folks on staff who do engineering and support and marketing. And we're a 26-person organization that makes a product, and we're all in one place, which is we're pretty special in the U.S. I don't think we're normal that way. I think most people think, okay, I'm going to make one part of a thing. We have, maybe they make gears for something, or they make this, that, or the other. We're building building full-on products that have software as well. I didn't even mention that. We've got a software team as well. So it's could we do this 10 years ago? No. Can we do this now? Yes. Like, yay for the tools of being able to collaborate with software engineers to collaborate. Yay for the sort of like, thank goodness, Autodesk bought HSM Works. It makes Fusion 360 and all the CAM, and that all just makes sense without costing a fortune. It's an exciting time to be a manufacturer in the United States. The game is different. Like, I think a lot of the folks who have had manufacturing operations, like, they look at their kids, and similar to farming, like, the kids are like, no, I don't want to do that. Whereas, like, but in terms of the innovation space, like, it's an exciting time to be an innovator anywhere in the world, frankly, to be able to put together a team of folks to do mechanical engineering, software engineering, and manufacturing all together under the same roof. Like, we are living in a dreamy time, regardless of where you are in the world, for doing that. Like, I'm grateful for that. How the U.S. stacks up against the rest of the world in that, I think in some ways, the playing field is a lot more even right now for the most part. Like, there's teams that do manufacturing in Europe. Is that easier? It has its upsides and the downside, like the tax situation in Europe, like, and the amount, like, if you're in Paris, like, it's hard to have a small company in France because, like, in order to give people, like, however many weeks a year, 8 weeks a year vacation, you have to have a bigger workforce to accommodate that type of stuff, right? Whereas, like, in Italy, like, so I think in France, the average size of a company is like 400 people. And whereas in Italy, like, the average size of a company is like 2 people. So, like, just different cultures around how things get made and done. But is it a great time to make stuff in the world? Like, yeah, if you can make something that people want, like, you can put together a team anywhere in the world to do it. So, like, how the U.S. stacks up against everybody else, I think in many ways it's just like, it's an evener playing field for the most part.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've run into a lot as well. We had a guest on, Zane Hinksberger, a couple of days ago, who just bought a racking company, and there's like 2 things happening. There's a whole wave of, I don't know, almost influencer sort of back stuff that I'm not sure how real it is, where people are going, hey, the boomer generation is getting rid of their businesses, you can go buy them, owner finance, whatever. And obviously in the machining space, a lot of people are like, great, let me go jump on that. and cool, like on a one-to-one or individual basis, like that does seem, if you I'm biased towards people that want to do that versus starting a SaaS company or whatever. But funnily enough, the SaaS and the software and the tooling part is also a reason why this is exciting right now, is because, and I'm just trying to underline what you're saying, which is like, maybe you don't, maybe a company, buy a racking company, and maybe it has 15 or 30 employees. They're actually, if you do come in with some skills about business operations and customer acquisition and a bunch of that stuff, you can scale up that business without, is it going to add a lot more jobs? Maybe not. And that's kind of the reality of today, but there is still headroom to grow a business. All right, let's talk about art machines, because I know that's your latest thing and that's what you're excited about. Define, first of all, like, what does an art machine, what would you call an art machine? And in your case, talk about the product of what you're actually launching, but the why has this space been compelling to you? I know even before you were selling a machine, this is something that's been near and dear to your heart for a long time, machine-aided art.
Yeah, let's jump into that. I also want to bookmark. So I've spent a bunch of time in the last 8 years, like shopping for businesses, for lack of a better way to put it, and learning about how businesses get bought and sold. And I've bought and sold businesses both at my time at MakerBot and independently as an individual. And I think that I'd like to. I think that's really interesting and as a
Well, let's
as a
go into
thing.
it.
So
Yeah.
let's jump into that. So I would like so there's like with anything that you want to do, you should probably get into it and be in it for a little while before you make like big moves. So, um, for example, I got into watches and we made a watch and we imported Swiss movements and we put it all together. And if I could go back in time, I would have spent another year collecting and nerding out about watches before I started making my own. Um, in some cases, it makes sense to get to know the landscape before you jump in. In other cases, it's good to jump right in, and it's a better idea to be naive and stupid because anybody in their right mind wouldn't do it. And being naive can be a benefit to jumping into something because all of a sudden then you have to work your way out of it, right? And that is a weird advantage to be to commit to something that you aren't smart enough to know was a good idea or not at the beginning, because it gives you the benefit of already being in it with it and not second guessing yourself perpetually. There was a company I looked at. It was a couple hours away in the middle of New York. I was like, "Can we go out to lunch?" And the owners were like, "It's like 2 hours to Albany, maybe an hour and a half to Albany." And they were like, but we don't have restaurants." So I was like, "Okay." So made sure to show up like after lunch, and they made quartz annealing ovens, and they were two brothers who had inherited the business from their father, and the next generation didn't want to run the operation, and they had one employee, and they were very successful. They bought their Corvettes. One was into the historic Corvettes, one was into the modern Corvettes. They listened to the emergency radio lines all day long as like their sort of, I don't know, entertainment, I guess.
No, I like
And
these guys. These
yeah,
are my people.
yeah, and they had one employee who was primarily like a welder and sheet metal stuff. They bought a new welder that nobody liked that sat in the corner, and they're still using their dad's welder from back in the day. And they would put together these ovens that were, bent metal with insulation and were used in the annealing process for quartz, because quartz is the one thing that you can have silicon wafers touch because it doesn't leak boric acid or any of these things. It's like a pure-ish, it's like a material it's a material you can use to handle this stuff. So all in that industry, all the what they call furniture is made out of quartz. So I was like, this is really cool. And if I could go back in time, I regret not buying this company. I couldn't have, I didn't have the bandwidth on my team to adopt this company at the time. So it wasn't a good idea to do it for me in general, but I still think like, oh, this company was rad. And they had been doing this for like 50 years. They had a pipeline that if they could make more, they would sell more. They had, and they, their website didn't really like, I think they developed their website in like 98 and hadn't changed anything. It wasn't very accurate. And it wasn't about that at all. It was all about the relationships, their customers. Their products lasted 30 to 40 years. And when they were done, they wanted another one from the same company. So it was like really like in many ways old school. And part of me, like, I wish I'd bought this in 2021, 22, before the sort of CHIPS Act had really kicked off, because I feel like I could have probably really taken some of the wind in the sails of the CHIPS Act to grow the company and explore it. And I'm also just very interested in just sort of the sort of, what I would call, high tech manufacturing of stuff that couldn't be made 100 years ago. And silicon wafers is one of those things. So those kind of deals come up because you can see that there's like all these like biz, buy, sell, I think, or one of these websites that are really janky in terms of being able to find businesses that are for sale, that people put businesses up, and the people who are selling their businesses are not good at selling businesses because the business has been in their family forever. And then there's nicer websites like Accelerated Manufacturing, where you can go shopping for more mature, where there's more of they've hired a broker that is going to help manage that process. And I think that's worth they bring value to the sales process, and being able to connect people and understand the values of companies. And it's pretty interesting to shop for businesses. I mean, but you have to be somebody who it likes to hire people, right? Because if you buy a company, the likelihood that if it's in the neighborhood, you're in good shape because you can probably keep all the employees. But if, when I was thinking about buying this quartz annealing oven company, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to hire a welder. All the equipment probably like isn't going to stand up to OSHA when they finally show up in my new shiny building. So I'm going to have to buy a new, a new metal brake. I would have to buy. We would have actually had to use the modern welding equipment. And then just safety stuff. So we would have had to build a proper paint booth. Those kind of things. So you have to be, if you're going to build a company, you have to be somebody who likes to work with people and get people motivated and find people and manage people. And that is actually like, if there's anything that's sort of like, I wish there was more of in America, it would be like good management. And I'd like to be a better manager myself. So I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm good at this. It's managing, the human part of any business is the hardest part, right?
I've looked at a few businesses myself. I don't know what the solution is exactly, but it is a real barrier. And to a certain extent, depending on the business, you are just buying the relationships, like the customer relationships, right? Like this annealing company probably, maybe has 100 customers or whatever it is. And that's obviously, the real value, but you still have to be able to turn around and provide the same level of a service that they've given for 50 plus years to these same people. And if your CapEx right at the beginning is nuts because you have to buy all new equipment and you can't just pick it up lily pad midstream and go, great, like let me keep this alive while I'm reinvesting it in there. I think that's why a lot of these companies aren't getting sold, is because when people look at it, whether it's an individual or private equity or whatever, it just doesn't have the immediate turnaround that it would need to be able to keep it as a small business. And so I think there's a ton of American manufacturing that's caught in that middle zone where it's like, it's not big enough to warrant a giant investment, but it's the whole market is maybe not big enough to warrant a collection of small ones either. So it makes sense to do a roll up. Before we go though, I do want to talk about art machines.
Yeah, let's dig in.
So you got a new product. It was another acquisition, if I'm not mistaken, where you took an existing product and brought it in-house from somebody. Tell people what it is. Art machine is a little generic of a term. Like what is it specifically?
I think every company has to sort of evolve to in the modern, like I think it used to be that you could have a product and you might have 20 years of sales of that before competition or you needed to refresh that. But the world just moves faster these days. So there's like my background, I'm a public school teacher, public school art teacher for the most part. I was a generalist, but mostly I taught art. And then I ended up making making stuff, and then making videos about making stuff, and then starting a company that makes things that makes 3D printers that make things. And now I'm here. And so one of the things that came up was in 2023, the Whitney Museum of American Art asked me to make an art machine for an exhibition of Harold Cohen's art. And Harold Cohen was this amazing artist who did AI art he started in '69 learning programming, and he was making his own plotters and art machines in the '70s until his death in 2016. And um, in working with the Whitney, we worked with his son and his assistant to resuscitate these old software programs that generate art every time you run them. And then they asked me to make the machines that would produce this art in the way that he had produced art, because whenever he would have a museum show, he would also show the machine making art. And so I got wrapped into that, and I'm a plotter fanatic. I love drawing machines. I love art machines. This really is in the zone of like my obsession with making machines and loving artwork and the art, the creative process. So I dug right into this, and then pretty quickly, I'm friends with Evil Mad Scientist since forever, because we both were at Maker Fair, the first Maker Fair in like 2005 or whenever it was, and stayed friends ever since. And so when they were like, "Oh, you're making art machines, like let's join forces," I was like, "Let's go." So we pulled in their originally called the AxiDraw, now called the NextDraw, as it's a Bantam Tools product, which is a really great cantilevered arm drawing machine. And interestingly enough, like it is a gateway into machines. So we see these in schools, and similar to 3D printing, when they're available to students, they get the thrill of controlling machines with computers, which is like a really for people who are kinesthetic learners, which back in the day those kids would get thrown into like auto shop, right? Or made to feel stupid. Now these young people are like the stars of the robotics team, right? And it's exciting time for those types of students. And so the plotters are a great entry gateway into computer controlled machines. That's one thing. And then they're used by artists to make art, and that was probably a pretty obscure thing until the whole NFT thing showed up. And then I started collecting computer made art after I sold MakerBot in 2013. And I was one of like 4 people who were totally obsessed with collecting, historic computer art. And then 2021, 2022 arrives, and all of a sudden with NFTs, there's like 20,000 speculators in the NFT market, and a lot of them become obsessed with art and become art collectors. And all the market, just every piece of historical computer art for the most part gets just bought up. And all of these new artists start emerging, because there's a dozen artists really between the 60s and 2010 doing computer art and making drawings and paintings with machines. So now there's tens of thousands. So it's it's an exciting trend to be part of empowering artists to use machines to turn their digital art into physical art with traditional materials. And then there's also just all sorts of other weird stuff that people use our machines for. There's people use it in labs to do pipette work. People do all sorts of weird stuff with our machines, because they're XYZ, computer control machines that run on software. So
Yeah, the machine. If people don't know the machines themselves, like it's very. If you come from a machining world, it's probably closest to like what you would see a sheet goods CNC rig do. Like there's an XY gantry, and then the tool head does have some Z, but that Z is not the big factor. It's really more about a giant amount of XY space. How big are your art? Sorry, what Nextdraw, is that the brand? How big are the Nextdraw machines?
So we have two lines of art machines. We have the NextDraw line, which are the cantilevered art ones. They're the more affordable ones. Still great. They start at 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that you can draw on, and they go up to 22 inches by 34 inches. And then we have our art frame line, which is has more control in the Z, and that's useful for people who want to do weird stuff like painting, like smushing brushes into a canvas. And those come in 18 by 24 and 24 by 36 inch sizes of material, of like plottable areas.
I love that space myself. Part of it is I think like it's a little bit of a spectrumy, spurgy tickle. Just to I don't know, machines are my friends, I guess. And then part of it for me too, I'm like a mid artist at a lot of things, music and visual arts and all this stuff. But because I grew up in a very uh, tech uh, technophilic environment. My grandfather was an electrical engineer and computer programmer, so it's always been nice for me because early on I recognized that art was something that I got a ton of pleasure out of, but I also wasn't ever going to be able to put enough time in to get great at it. And so almost all of my artistic expression is, whether it's like synthesizers or whether it is, a CNC thing or whatever, it is the ability to say, I've got, it's a little of the Rick Rubin thing. It's like, I have taste and I know what I'm looking for, but what I'm also really looking for is to have it done. And that's why I think that space is so interesting. We're remodeling a house here in the Hudson Valley, and I have been, to my wife's uh, eternal patience, let's put it, holding off on like putting a lot of art and things on the walls because I've specifically been like, when we get to that point, I want to do it. I want to generate it. Like I want to make our own stuff. I don't want to just buy stuff off the line. And is there aesthetically or culturally like a big difference between buying a print from IKEA and making something that looks almost identical with your machine? To me, there is, but I feel like that's a space that more and more people are going to maybe don't even understand is about to really explode, is that you're going to be able to put your own stamp on your built environment in a lot easier way now than anybody's ever gotten to before.
Having taste is something that I think about a lot. And how do you you can't teach people to have taste because they have to willingly want to do it and experience things and decide if they like it or not, and then make decisions based on that independent observation. So, like, I spent 10 years when I was a school teacher and when I was attempting to be a professional artist, seeing every piece of art in Seattle. And when I started, I liked like 10% of what I saw in galleries and in museums. And after 10 years, there was probably like 1% of what I saw I liked, like my taste. I zoned in on my jam of what I like, and what I like is art that started with intention without understanding the outcome. Like, and I can feel that in artwork when artists aren't imagining like a sun. They're like documenting the shape of something, and they're not sure what it's going to look like in the end. Like that's my jam. But I had to buy cutlery, right? And I was like, I'm going to buy the best cutlery, and I went out and I looked at all the cutlery and bought what I thought was the best cutlery, and then I got it, and it turned out it looked good and sucked to use. So then I had to go back and think about it from a different point of view. So taste is one of those things that you really only get by like committing and failing and trying again.
I come from, as you know, a consumer, like I was a gadget blogger. Like I was one of
Yeah.
the first gadget bloggers. And then that led very quickly, having spent several years basically just rewriting press releases and putting a garbage feed in front of people saying, you can buy this, you can buy this. That very quickly affected my taste into being like what I think turned into the, mid-aughts, like best made acts aesthetic or whatever, which is like, I need things that are finely crafted and I need them, if they're built in the US or Germany or Japan or whatever, like, that craftsmanship factor. And then that's abutting now things like, AI, generative work. And there's just so much there. And I actually do think as we continue forward with Tool or Diet, this is going to be a big theme of a lot of it because my suspicion is that made in America is going to need to, or has the potential to encompass some of that. Like there's got to be something about the idea of I'm going to pay a little more because it is either I can see the touch of a artist or creator or engineer in it, or on the sort of art generative side, I can see some of my taste in it. And there are many like it, but this fork, this set of cutlery, I affected 5% of its design, and I paid 3x to get it because it's mine now. And when I pick it up every day to eat my bowl of cereal, I'm feeling something from that investment. I have a feeling that Made in America can might start encompassing more of that.
I would argue with that. Between MakerBot and Bantam Tools, I had a gift company where we made really just exceptional things worth making, right? And everything was customizable. And if it wasn't, and that might have just meant engraving, or it might have meant like you could use sliders and affect the design, and then we would make it sort of custom. And I think there's, but that was 2017. So maybe it's different now. But back then, the value of something that had been validated by a designer and validated by the trends, or the sort of like the public or something, like people were scared to be designers themselves, because when you become a designer, there's a risk that you'll make crap, right? And I think that's a risk that a lot of people don't want to take. And so when I made customizable things, almost nobody bought the customizable things. They just bought the standard thing that had been designed and validated. So it might be different though, because I think nearly everybody has had an experience of being like, okay, I wonder what a Pete Seeger song would look like if he wrote a song about this, that, or the other, this modern thing. And then you ask ChatGPT to write it, and you're like, okay, give me the chords for that. And then does the chords for it. And sure enough, it sounds like a Pete Seeger song about some contemporary issue. And then you're like, make me, and then you go to Midjourney and you're like, okay, make me the cover art for this album about this contemporary issue written by Pete Seeger. And you can make this all happen instantly. And as I think more people have that experience of using the sort of tools to manifest things easier than it's ever been before. Like, you don't have to go to art school to do this stuff. And now, you can kind of see it in some places. Like, I'll read stuff and I'll be like, okay, ChatGPT wrote 80% of this, but it's still readable, right?
I don't take offense at your pushback, because I have I'm pretty, I like to big up my hillbilly rustic upbringing, but I also have I've got a lot of bourgeoisie in me at this point too. And I can't, with an ethnography of one, I can't really figure it out either. But there is something, to me, it's encompassing of, it's more the shop class part than it
Yeah.
is the art gallery part. No offense, because I do think that we have lost something culturally about what it feels like to make something that is worse, but you made it. And I think if we get more of that in there, into our culture, even the crude things like the economy, and it's like the fact, if it's an onboarding space to be able to say, start to see what a little bit of your input looks like here, and then 1 out of 100 of those people will go through that experience to say, I actually do want to get in deep now and understand how to make it complete end to end. So we should wrap it up. Thank you so much for. Oh, wait,
I want to
okay,
add
okay.
one thing. So
Okay,
I think you're right though, because I think there's we're talking about agency, right? Like, and I think that's one of the opportunities we have in America, is to offer people agency. So like for me, I think I had a shop class experience in 7th grade where I had a teacher who was like, you're going to be broke someday in your life, and I'm going to teach you how to make wooden toys that you can sell at a flea market every weekend and survive and feed your kids if you have to. And I took that to heart. Like, I still remember that, right? So I think there's something about the opportunities for agency that are really exciting in modern society that allow people to think, I could do that, where they might not have thought that before. Like, I think that's the most exciting thing about what's happening in manufacturing, what's happening in a lot of industries, is more people are having those like Picasso moments where they're like, I could draw that, I could paint that. And they just might, and they might not, but they the idea of agency in all these spaces is the barriers to entry are so much lower. That's the most exciting thing.
I think that it will be better in this. I think people will have a better life. I think the country will be stronger. I think all of these like good, national level, cultural level, civilization level problems will be there if people go all the way down to the micro and go, I'm not afraid to spend some time learning about something that will not directly correlate to me, my career or my business or whatever it is, because it will allow me to make better decisions about the things I do make those choices for. But it blows my mind the degree to which we have hyper-served that with like tech and software, and have avoided it with shop class and Votech, and even encouraging people how to make their own, or how to change their own oil. And like, That's the part of the lever I want to push on more.
Our BOCES program locally is filled up to capacity. All the students want to go to the BOCES program. That used to be where they sent the kids who were not doing good, and now it's like one of the most competitive parts of our local education system. So hopefully the trend is going in the right direction.
I forget sometimes, with all the success you had, about starting in education and the background of that, and that is already been a big part of Tool or Die, is talking about like what does the education in this space looks like. But for now, I'll leave you be. Congrats on the new product line, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Joel. A pleasure.